Denizens of the interwebs, I am Double V, and welcome to Tomb Raider, an action survival game developed by Crystal Dynamics and published by the evil demon fiends over at Square Enix. It is a fresh new take on a franchise that's been repeatedly beaten further and further into the dirt for at least the past decade. Tomb Raider explores, and I quote, the intense and gritty origin story of Lara Croft and her ascent from a young woman to a hardened survivor. Armed with only raw instincts and the ability to push beyond the limits of human endurance, Lara must fight to unravel the dark history of a forgotten island, to escape its relentless hold. This all takes place, of course, in an epic and adventuresome fashion, with overtones of Indiana Jones meets Max Payne, as well as some aspects of what you typically find in, let's say, a horror survival game. Now, it says the word survivor in their synopsis. I find that instead of turning into a hardened survivor, she more like turns into a killing machine. But hey, that's just my opinion. This, of course, all centered around Lara Croft, the gritty vixen of badassery that you love and know from games over the past 17 years. Although this time she starts out a bit different. Afraid and vulnerable, unconfident, unskilled, badass, and before her boob job. A freshly graduated archaeologist from the university who is flung far from her familiar libraries and kitchens and into the absolutely brutal situation she finds herself in. She learns some man mode skills, but mostly it seems she discovers that she has the innate ability to gloriously decimate hordes of armed men without breaking a sweat, and leap tall buildings with the greatest of ease, and so on and so forth. On a good note, the game features some incredible scenes and atmospheric puzzles that are executed with jaw-dropping immersion. Really. A good example would be some of the high wind-based puzzles where you must use the wind to accomplish a task. It is very fascinating. For example, to use gale force gusts to complete a task. Cacophonic, blustering sound effects. You know, you destroy, in one of them you destroy pillars holding up a giant bell so that it might break through the floor below and lead you to your triumphant escape. More engaging moments of awe can be found in the survival cutscenes that pop up in the middle of play and provide you with a visceral struggle with Death Island's vicious intricacies for a moment. These things are all executed very naturally, and it provides a solid ground for a stupendous gameplay experience. These things never come without their faults, though. I couldn't find a lot of them, but one bad note. The quickly flashing commands during those survival cutscenes tell you what to press in order to survive. They don't always explicitly tell you which button it means. And when you first start out, if you don't remember the pattern of what it looked like, you can be stuck in a horrific Groundhog Day style situation. A death cycle trying to figure out which button it wants you to press in order to make the angry Russian man stop choking you out or what have you. This, of course, is only a minor issue because as soon as you recognize what sort of action each little thing looks like, you'll know what it's demanding even without the clues. But enough of that. The graphics. Let's talk about the graphics. From a tactical standpoint, they are meritoriously notable, shall we say. While saving your artifact nerd friends from a cult of insane guys with Russian names who worship an ancient Japanese god queen, it needs to look epic, goddammit. And so it does. It features nearly every shader and graphical enhancement option known to man, and executes them in a fashion well deserving of a AAA title. The only flaws were found in the shadows, both in the low dynamic shadow resolution, which is found in a lot of games these days. I don't know why they do that. CPU issues, I suppose, on the console. The other shadow issue is with the aesthetics of some of the daytime full shadows, where it was a bit flat looking. Kind of a throwback look, if you will. The models, meshes, textures are excellent in almost every conceivable case, and in some points during the game, it looks positively pristine. But if it looks so good, how does it run, you ask? Well, the optimization is fair, but it does leave something to be desired. Some of the higher-end settings provide almost zero visual difference at the cost of massive frame drops, and some of the more important settings seem to be CPU heavy, more than what is found in other single-player titles. For the most part, however, the level of visual quality I got while maintaining an acceptable frame rate on my modest mid-range gaming machine was rather good. Most of the animations in-game are presented at an acceptable level. I didn't see any jaw-dropping, industry-redefining animations take place, but there are no jarring animations that I noticed either. And it all seems to be very solid for the purposes of the game. That being said, there are no jiggle physics. And let's face it, in 2013, you almost should lose points for not putting jiggle physics in a Lara Croft game. I mean, come on, people, know your audience. Anyway, the art style of the game is at a high level, especially being that it takes place in a semi-realistic environment that's supposed to reflect a modern-day atmosphere. These art styles in modern-day type games tend to be dull, but in here, the slick Japanese-influenced architecture. How about architecture? The bold landscape level of world detail, classic folk legend style, makes it all a joy to behold, really. It's like a heroic poem whose words have been turned into pixels. From a user interface standpoint, the approach they've taken is phenomenal. It ranges from sharp and organized looks in the menus to a more artsy tech painter kind of look in the campsite and build menu. It looks outstanding, and for the most part, it's not overly confusing in its presentation, although it could be slightly better organized at the main camp section. But maybe I'm the only one that was confused by that at first. Well, I wasn't really confused, but what happened was I missed that there were more than one skill type that I could do. Wasn't overly good at showing that. But really, none of that matters. Perhaps the best part is that for a large part of the game, there's no always-on heads-up display, which aids in immersion quite nicely and was an intelligent decision, in my opinion. It does not feel like a ported console UI. Important. Perhaps the greatest bonus to us PC gamers. It has a snappy response with very few perceived clunks. It has a nice circular navigation design during the campsite and build portion, whereby you can easily access your desired area of interest without backtracking too much. The ammunition indicators appear only when needed and are easy to read. Gun selection UI couldn't be any more streamlined, and overall, it's a pretty damn exemplary UI compared to a lot of other titles out there. As for the sound in the game, well, perk up your ears because the sound quality is top-notch. Crisp and clear, no errors. I didn't notice any strange or quirky sound effects. it is notably well done from a design standpoint. Thousands of little cracks, whistles, bellows, drips, clunks, creaks, rings, bangs, clangs, and other background babble sing you a song of ambient splendor as you move through your adventure, blah 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 blah. What can be said about the sound? It's good sound. It makes you feel like you're there. The gusty wind scenes are highly immersive and world-rocking. The gunshots fairly realistic, if not lacking a little bass. Footsteps seem fine, as do most other Foley representations in general. As for the voices, a majority of the voice acting is passable, but it's a bit hit and miss. Lara herself even has a strange accent. I'm not an expert on British accents, but she doesn't carry any British accents that I'm used to hearing. Some of the other characters have voice work ranging from terrible, bad, to masterful, godlike, legendary. I mean, some of the voices are great, some of the voices are awful. The cultist thugs in particular are quite bad in some cases, being that they all have Russian names and yet have an American accent and a very generic voice acting. They say silly little things like, "Hey guys, come on, let's get her." At one point they actually reminded me of the dreadful and wretched plague that is anime voiceovers. Ugh. As for the music in this game is perfectly ambient and situational cinematic music. It doesn't stand out at all really, but it lends itself to the immersion in a supreme way. Oh, boom, boom, boom. Let's talk about controls. Overall, the design of the controls is first class. There's no strange reaching required to perform adequately. It's all very intuitive. I do have to wonder, though, why they made it so the left mouse button does next to nothing in the game. There's no firing from the hip, for example. Only when aimed can you use the left mouse button to fire, and outside of that it really doesn't do anything but control the UI. It's a strange design in that regard, no doubt. But nonetheless, the controls are rock solid in their planning. There's very little clunkiness in the controls. Everything is responsive, and the automatic movements such as grabbing onto ropes and ledges happens very naturally in a way that is reminiscent of Assassin's Creed. This is what happens when you read your notes. Anyway, I must say that it's a better functionality than Assassin's Creed in regards to the free running, although the free running seems more stylistic in Assassin's Creed. It's funner, I suppose, but you don't get the weird clunkiness where you're jumping off the wall and you can't move, and it does it for you a little more than Assassin's Creed does, let me put it that way. The melee combat is actually also similar to Assassin's Creed, although much dumbed down. It's like a stale version of it. The melee combat is not what you should play this game for. Well, you see it right here. Guy hits me, I hit him back. It looks a little bit like Ezio doing some shit. The shooter aspect of it works very precisely, and the automatic cover is seamlessly implemented. Yes, that means that all of your deepest and most violent fantasies involving a cute girl with deadly weapons and scores to settle can be played out with the greatest of ease. And no blow-up dolls or action figures required. In terms of game mechanics, all of the mechanics are exceptionally simple. The upgrades extremely straightforward. There will be no theory crafting or complex strategizing with this title, which means it probably has a low endgame and replayability factor. Although simple, the mechanics are perfected. Every feature of the game is functional to the highest degree. The highest degree. As for a so-called skill requirement, the game is pretty easy to pick up, but some of the survival scenes, early on even, require a fair reaction time that new gamers might find to be a bit quick, and the combat on the easy setting does ramp up to a level that games don't typically reach on their lowest setting. Now, it isn't obscenely difficult by any means, but people who are new to the genre or gaming in general might die a lot while they're just trying to get through the story on the lowest difficulty setting. As for a learning curve, well, zero. There's zero learning curve, you pick it right up. I imagine even if you've never played a video game in your life, you'd pick this right up. You know, all in all, it's a title that fans of the Tomb Raider series, or simply fans of cinematic story-driven RPGs, should not miss. I actually enjoy it. It's a game that I will continue to play through. Quite good. Square Enix. Of course, they're trying to sell you all kinds of junk. There's plenty of DLC to be had. You can spend to your desire, or you can just play the goddamn game. Anyway, that's it for me here. If you'll excuse me, I've got to do something heroic immediately. It's a good day. And remember, kids, never throw feces at the police. Coffee creamer powder is highly flammable, and don't sign record deals on the city bus. Double V out.
Then the two of us will kill every last one of these crazed sons of bitches. It'll be just like the old days.